The night my mother kicked me out of the house started like any other. We had been arguing more frequently lately, our disagreements escalating over time. I could feel the tension simmering, waiting for the right moment to boil over. The argument that night had been about something trivial, but it quickly spiraled out of control. Words were exchanged, harsh and unforgiving, and before I knew it, she had reached her breaking point. "Get out! I can't take this anymore!" she shouted, her face red with anger. "Just go!" I stood there, stunned, the weight of her words sinking in. My mother had never kicked me out before. We had fought, sure, but it had never come to this. She glared at me, her eyes filled with a mix of fury and something else, disappointment maybe. I didn't have time to process it. I grabbed my backpack, stuffed a few essentials into it, and walked out the door, the sound of it slamming shut behind me echoing in the night. The air outside was cool, a stark contrast to the heated argument that had just taken place. I stood on the porch for a moment, unsure of what to do. My friends all lived too far away for me to walk to their houses, and it was too late to catch a bus. I had no choice but to start walking, hoping I'd figure something out along the way. The streets were quiet, the occasional car passing by. I wandered aimlessly, my thoughts racing. Where would I go? What would I do? I felt a mix of anger and fear. Anger at my mother for kicking me out and fear of what lay ahead. The city, usually so familiar, seemed like a different place at night. Shadows loomed larger, noises seemed louder, and I felt exposed and vulnerable. I walked for hours, my feet growing sore, until I found myself in a park. It wasn't the safest place to spend the night, but it was better than nothing. I found a bench under a street lamp and sat down, my backpack clutched tightly in my lap. The reality of my situation began to sink in. I was alone, with nowhere to go, and no idea what to do next. The night was long and uncomfortable. I couldn't sleep, my mind racing with thoughts of what had happened and what I would do next. The cold seeped into my bones, and I pulled my jacket tighter around me, trying to stay warm. Every noise made me jump, and I kept an eye out for anyone who might pose a threat. It was a miserable night, one of the longest I could remember. As the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, I knew I couldn't stay in the park any longer. I needed a plan. My stomach growled, reminding me that I hadn't eaten since the argument. I checked my wallet. Barely enough money for a meal, let alone anything else. I decided to head to a nearby diner, hoping to figure something out over breakfast. The diner was warm and smelled of coffee and frying bacon. I found a seat in the corner, ordered the cheapest item on the menu, and tried to gather my thoughts. I needed a place to stay, a way to earn some money, and most importantly, I needed to figure out how to fix things with my mom. The enormity of the task ahead felt overwhelming. After breakfast, I spent the day wandering the city, looking for work. I went from store to store, asking if they had any openings, but had no luck. Rejection after rejection wore me down, and as the day turned into evening, I felt a deep sense of despair. I was exhausted, both physically and emotionally, and I had no idea where I would sleep that night. As I walked through the streets, I noticed a group of people gathered around a church. They were handing out food and offering shelter to those in need. It wasn't much, but it was something. I approached them, explaining my situation. They welcomed me with kindness, giving me a hot meal and a place to sleep for the night. It wasn't home, but it was a relief to have a roof over my head. The next few days were a blur of searching for work, trying to find a more permanent place to stay, and dealing with the reality of my situation. I felt like I was drowning, the weight of my circumstances pulling me down, but I couldn't give up. I had to keep going, keep trying, keep hoping that things would get better. One evening, as I sat in the church's shelter, I overheard a conversation between two volunteers. They were talking about a local youth center that helped kids in situations like mine. They offered counseling, job placement assistance, and even temporary housing. It sounded like exactly what I needed. The next morning, I went to the youth center. The staff there were kind and understanding. They listened to my story, offering support and guidance. They helped me find a part-time job and arranged for temporary housing. For the first time since I had been kicked out, I felt a glimmer of hope. With their help, I began to piece my life back together. The job wasn't glamorous, but it was something, and it gave me a sense of purpose. I started saving money, planning for the future. The youth center also helped me reconnect with my mother. They arranged for us to meet with a counselor, someone who could help mediate and facilitate a conversation between us. The first meeting was tense. My mother and I sat across from each other, the counselor between us. My mom looked tired, her face lined with worry. I could see that the past few weeks had been hard on her too. The counselor encouraged us to talk openly, to express our feelings without judgment. "I'm sorry," my mom said, her voice breaking. "I never should have kicked you out. I was so angry and I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know what else to do." I felt a lump in my throat, the anger and hurt I had been carrying with me starting to melt away. "I'm sorry too," I said. "I didn't mean to push you to that point. I didn't know how to deal with everything either." We talked for a long time, opening up about our frustrations, fears, and hopes. The counselor guided us, helping us find common ground and a way to move forward. It wasn't easy, and there were tears and moments of anger, but slowly we began to understand each other better. Over the next few weeks, my mom and I continued to work on our relationship. We attended counseling sessions together, learning how to communicate more effectively and how to support each other. It wasn't an overnight fix, but gradually we started to rebuild the trust that had been broken. During this time, I continued working and saving money. The youth center's temporary housing program had given me a safe place to stay, but I knew I needed to find a more permanent solution. With the help of the center's job placement services, I found a better-paying job and started looking for my own apartment. The day I moved into my new place was a mix of emotions. I felt proud of how far I had come, but there was also a sense of sadness. The journey had been hard, and the scars of the experience would always be with me. But I had grown stronger, and I knew I could face whatever challenges lay ahead. My mom and I continued to work on our relationship, and with time, things improved. We still had our disagreements, but we were better at handling them. We learned to listen to each other, to express our feelings without letting anger take over. The bond between us grew stronger, forged through the trials we had faced. One evening, as we sat in my new apartment, my mom looked around and smiled. "You've done so well, Alex. I'm so proud of you." "Thanks, Mom," I said, feeling a warmth in my chest. "I couldn't have done it without your support." We hugged, a simple gesture that meant so much. It had been a long, difficult journey, but we had made it through. We had learned to face our problems head-on, to support each other, and to find strength in our love for one another. The experience had changed me in many ways. I had learned the importance of resilience, of never giving up, no matter how hard things got. I had discovered the value of community and the kindness of strangers, and most importantly, I had come to appreciate the bond between my mother and me, a bond that had been tested and had emerged stronger. As I lay in bed that night, I thought about the journey I had been on. It had been a road filled with challenges, but also with moments of growth and learning. I had faced my fears, overcome obstacles, and found a way to build a better future. The night my mother kicked me out had been the start of a new chapter in my life. It had been a wake-up call, a catalyst for change, and while it had been incredibly hard, it had also been an opportunity for growth, for building resilience, and for discovering the strength within me. In the end, I realized that life is full of unexpected twists and turns. It's not always easy, and there will be moments of darkness. But it's in those moments that we find our true strength, that we discover what we're capable of. And with the support of those we love, we can overcome anything. My mother and I had come through a storm, but we had emerged stronger, closer, and more appreciative of each other. And as I drifted off to sleep, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, with love, understanding, and the unbreakable bond of family.